Without the camera. I'm currently unmuted. So for this session, I want to first thank everyone for joining, especially our esteemed speaker, Senator John Bramnick. The purpose for today's conversation is as a result of the recent concern our Bernards Township residents have raised related to safety concerns within our community. In particular, folks have been very upset by some burglaries in which individuals have broken into homes while residents are present to take fobs to steal cars. As we've shared as a community, this statewide epidemic of car theft is not unique to Bernards Township. Unfortunately, it is something affecting the entire state of New Jersey. As such, with a little research and speaking to many residents, I immediately went to some of our expert elected officials, in particular, Senator John Bramnick, about this topic, and quickly learned that part of the reason why we're having this epidemic is related to state policies that are in place. And so he's been very gracious to allow for his time to spend with us to share and educate about this topic. So with that, Senator Bramnick, may I turn over the floor to you to address our Bernards Township residents?
Sure, thanks, Mayor. And I see some of the other council people as well, Janice Fields. I don't know if I see all other names, and I did see Scott Mitzner as well, the chairman. So I'm going to start from the top and then work down to the issues within the community. The issue that I believe is most important is that the bad guys actually know that the consequences of stealing a car or even breaking into a house are minimal. So an example would be, I spoke to an assistant prosecutor in Somerset County, and what he said was, if someone steals a car on January 1, 2024, they're immediately released from jail under the bail reform law, and their trial could be 2 years away. In the interim, if they steal another car, they still go out on bail, and that trial is another year or two away. So the consequences of stealing a car are known by the bad guys, and especially with the enterprises that hire people under the age of 18. So at the state level, we've tried to introduce things like minimum mandatory jail terms for people who steal cars or who break into houses, but there is not the will in Trenton to get that done. Now, that's a more complicated issue. That's an issue as to who controls the legislature, what policy elected officials, senators, and assembly people believe in. But I'm going to put that aside for a moment. Originally, I was a councilman in Plainfield, and I believe that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I have proposed to another number of communities, because not only have I spoken to Bernards, but I've spoken to both of the Chathams, to Westfield. We've heard this in communities within the region as to the people breaking into houses. And that happened actually when the fobs were taken out of the car, which was the recommendation of the police. It turned out that the bad guys decided just to go into the house. So I'm not telling you leave the fob in the car. I'm just saying that it didn't solve the problem. So I propose a joint task force between state, county, and local officials. Now, here's the political problem with that. First, the municipality must request help both from the county and the state, because the state and the county are not going to create a task force unless they're asked to come into the community. It's actually similar at the state level. The governor has to request federal assistance to come in. Now, we used to have an auto task force that used to work in Newark. And if you recall, there was a television program that actually showed what they did. What I'm saying is, I believe the municipalities have to demand this kind of task force. Now, we're not going to eliminate the crime, but we are going to move it. So I would want, and I have to be honest with you because I want to be straightforward. Most local police departments don't want outside entities coming into their towns. But I believe that an auto task force that goes into towns or municipalities that have multiple uh, criminal episodes, especially involving car thefts and burglaries, that's the kind of task force that we need, that are trained in actually observing, knowing how these operations operate, and bringing in, it's basically flooding whatever town is having the problem with outside help. I just don't believe that local police departments have the manpower to solve this problem. But as I said, that would be my immediate solution, or potential solution, or at least a deterrent against what we see. On that, I would turn it over for questioning. But to be honest with you, uh, it's really important that we demand, action. And I have to tell you, I don't believe that there's enough resources in any town to solve this problem, in based on the fact that the laws in the state of New Jersey simply don't punish the bad guys enough at this point, and they know it. So on that, I mean, those are basically the two observations I've made when I've heard from municipalities. But I'm happy to answer more specific questions, or deal with this issue. But I don't think it's as complicated. I don't think it's more complicated than what I've said.
Senator Bramnick?
Yeah.
In our conversations and my conversations with Chief Berger, our police chief, and listening to some of our officers, they've cited some of the state policies that are in place that perhaps need to be changed due to perhaps some legislation in articles and such have talked about, due to racial concerns for racial discrimination and social justice. Some things have been put in place where the police feel that they are working within handcuffs, if you will. And so looking for perhaps any advice that we as residents can do to ask for help from our elected officials at the state level to address some of these policies, and to try to request policies that are able to hold individuals that break the law more accountable.
Now we get into the philosophy of elected officials. Historically, we have seen a trend away from punishment, towards rehabilitation, towards a program where the court, not the courts, but the lawmakers have tried to find a reason not to put people in jail. That's been the trend. I did speak to the Attorney General, Matt Platkin, before this discussion tonight, and I indicated to him I have never seen, in my years both in the legislature and in local office, the outcry from the public in multiple towns as to the amount of crime involving cars and burglaries. I still believe, though, it takes political will to change the law. I don't believe what I see is the political will in Trenton. If you could get me 41 votes, in the assembly, 21 votes in the Senate, and the governor to sign it, we could produce some pretty significant and tough laws that would easily, would not easily, but would, the bad guys would know that the risk is not worth what they're being paid. But right now, until those laws are passed, and I had a press conference with the urban mayors. This was urban mayors from Newark, Patterson, Camden, and they all agreed they wanted to change the bail reform laws. They wanted, and this had to do with bad guys with guns. And the suburban police chiefs agree. Myself and other legislators proposed a law to keep the bad guys with guns in jail. I'm sorry, go ahead. I apologize. And we had no traction on that law. There's little will now in the legislature to do minimum mandatories. There's actually a number of groups that fight against any minimum mandatories. So what I say is, this is clear. If there's minimal consequence to someone stealing a car and the financial reward is significant, they're going to do it because they know the risk, is simply minimal. So how do you do that? Surely you want to call upon all your leaders, and I don't think you're going to have much. I'm going to be a little political. I don't think you have any problem on my side of the aisle, but clearly you want the other side of the aisle to join with us to pass these laws and make it riskier for the bad guys. I'm a simple guy when it comes to that, and that's the problem that we face.
Senator Bramnick, I don't know if you're able to see the chat, but there are some questions in the chat. If you cannot locate that, I can read you some of the questions that have come in.
Sure. While I'm looking for that, I can find the chat. But I see participants. I'll get the chat in a minute. All right, you can read it while I'm looking on my screen for the chat area. Go ahead.
So the first one, the first question is, can we deter them with increased patrolling?
Yes. The question is, and that's something at the local level. It's overtime, no question about that. I think there's no question that the more cars you have out on patrol, it's deterrent. But that's something within the local governing body to determine, and whether or not. And remember what the law is. There's a strict law that the chief of police decides how to utilize police in a town. A mayor and council can make suggestions, but the law is clear. The final decision is a decision by the chief of police under the law. So yes, clearly you can spend more money at the local level, and clearly, more police, more risk to the bad guys.
Thank you. And if I just may add, from a Bernards Township perspective, the police chief immediately put in place additional patrols at the time that these things are happening. So that was immediate. Township committee is considering and will work with our police chief and our police liaisons, Deputy Mayor Fields, as well as Committeeman McNally, will be looking very seriously at what are the resource needs, and then to look within the budgeting cycle to determine what opportunity they may be to increase the head count of our police department. In addition to that, there are other tools that have just been released this week, and we will continue to release, of things that the town is implementing at the local level. So with that, were you able to find the chat, Senator Bramnick?
I saw a question pop up. You need to read the next one.
Sure. So the next question is, are you recommending that the mayors get together and escalate this to create a task force, or is there something that you want the residents to do apart from communicating our issues to our elected officials?
Well, clearly communicate to state officials. You don't have to write to me because it's my legislation, but with respect to bringing mayors together, I think that's a really good idea. And I know the two Chatham mayors got together. The issue becomes there's clearly resources at the county level. The question is, will the local police agree to have outside law enforcement? That's question one you have to ask your police chief. Once you do that, you can ask the sheriff and the county prosecutor's office whether or not they can assist in terms of patrols, surveillance, manpower. Now, interestingly enough, one of the first things I did as a councilman in Plainfield, I created what was called the Civilian Radio Patrol. The police weren't too happy with it, to be honest with you. It was around for about a year. I'm not suggesting that because I just don't think that civilians are able to, have the law enforcement background. But I'm convinced by bringing an outside task force, similar what they did in Newark, because what used to happen when the car was stolen, they would alert the task force that was working out of Newark, and that had a significant deterrent effect on people stealing cars because once once it was reported, they were pretty good at catching the bad guys. So I would surely get together with other mayors and try to work with the county of putting a task force together. Now, what they did in Newark was they had each police department actually offered one of their police officers to join the task force. So let's assume you were able to get together with 4 or 5 municipalities and you created that task force. And that task force was able to monitor where the crime was. And that's done all the time because they keep pretty good statistics on where these things occurred. And if that task force moved around, it might be a significant deterrent effect on people coming into Somerset County, or in the case of the Chathams, Morris County, or in the case of Union County. So I love the idea of municipalities saying, okay, we see a spike in crime in Bernards. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to move this task force of 4 or 5 patrol cars who now are been trained in this area. They kind of know what to look for. Because these crimes normally occur. There's a pattern to it. The bad guys, they use science too. Maybe it's 3 a.m, maybe it's not. I don't know. So if you put that kind of task force together with other municipalities and you say, okay, we're going to have 5 cars come into Bernards tonight. The bad guys are going to see that, right? Because when they come in the main roads and you've got a police car at each main thoroughfare coming in, it's a deterrent effect. And then if the crime moves, because all you really do is move the crime around, you don't stop it. And that would be my first suggestion.
Thank you. And if I can just share, from my understanding, Bernard's they did lend an officer to the Newark Auto Task Force, Detective Mulhall, and he has been lead on many of the cases that have been in Bernard's because of his experience with Newark. And that is listening to one of the presentations he did to some residents that it's through his relationships that they've identified some of those young people that have, done some of the crimes within our community. So we have him back now, but there was that. Separately, if folks are interested, this is something that I've been in office for 3 weeks. We have the Somerset Hill mayors are getting together February the 5th, as well as I reached out to the Congress of Mayors, which is a statewide organization, and I requested a subcommittee specifically on this topic, and that's something they're bringing up. So this is something that is very important to me, and whatever I can do to ensure that we are mobilizing the right resources and to bring attention to this. That's what I'm in the process of doing, and I'll communicate that as we have more progress and actual action that will be taken.
Yeah, I love the fact that you have a task force with other municipalities. Of course, you're going to have to coordinate that with the county because there are technical rules, but I'm sure you can get past those rules. Your county would be I think, they'd be supportive of that kind of plan, and maybe the county throws in some support as well, whether it's finance or whether it's actually bodies. And then clearly, I'll be in touch with Colonel Callahan and say, hey, listen, you've got 3 or 4 towns out here. They're putting a task force together. They're going to monitor where the offenses are, and they're going to basically address wherever they think the most serious crime is.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the next question. It is, there are break-ins in our houses, armed. If police are at risk, what about the civilians and residents? Are we leaving them on their own?
I'm sorry. Tell me that one more time.
The statement is that the break-ins in the houses are of people who are armed. If police are at risk, what about the civilians and residents? Are we leaving them on their own?
Well, you would hope not. And well, you would hope not. I mean, that's why you'd want to increase the police presence and create a deterrence to burglaries, right? But yeah, if you've got the bad guys who are armed coming into homes, you clearly want to put together, whether it takes overtime or police. Clearly, I would hope we're not leaving them on their own, but to some degree, if you don't reduce the number of burglaries, they're going to feel they're going to feel vulnerable. So, but I would hope that people think that they're not on their own, but if crime continues, they would feel that way.
Thank you. Another question is drilling down more on the task force. What can the task force do?
Well, if you have, let's assume, I don't know how many cars, and I don't think we should talk about it, but how many cars are actually on patrol on any one night? If you have 4 or 5 and now you have 10, and you know kind of where the bad guys are coming into the town, clearly, if you've got 4 police cars on patrol, 5 police cars, they're responding to calls. So that means the more they're responding to calls, the less likely they're visible to the bad guys. So if you increase the number of patrols out there, it's more likely that when the bad guy comes into town, he's going, whoa, a lot of police here. I'm going somewhere else. So I would assume that that presence would have a deterrent effect on people who come into towns. Because look, this is a business for them, and they want to be efficient. If they see, police cars in every major thoroughfare, and they didn't see that before, they're basically making a left turn, a U-turn. They're going somewhere else, and that's why I say you're not ending the crime; you're moving it.
Thank you. The next comment is the Violent Crime Initiative was formed in August 2017 by the U.S. Attorney's Office of New Jersey. What other task forces would you recommend at the federal level?
Well, you're going to have to ask the congressmen or the United States senators about that. I'm very familiar with the situation in New Jersey. I'm not that familiar with the federal laws, but crime in New Jersey, you don't have the U.S. attorney involved normally in car thefts or burglaries. Normally, that's not a federal crime unless it involves something involving interstate. So I can't really answer what the federal role would be with respect to crimes in a municipality, because normally there's no role for federal agents, FBI, a U.S. attorney's office, not normally involved in local crime. So you're going to have to ask the congressman.
Thank you. And just so you know, I have had outreach with Congressman Kane, especially after listening to our police detective mention that there was a Bernard's car that was found in Africa. And so I have fed that back and I'm getting details from the police chief to share with Congressman Kane's office, because I think we all agree. And I learned this point from Assemblywoman Munoz. She mentioned that, if they're just driving these cars to the ports, that, the government, the federal government's very good about inspecting what comes in, but perhaps not so much as to, when they load those cars into containers and they ship them to countries like Africa, that there's something that we need to see what we can do there. So, more to come on that, but that outreach has been made.
I would reach out, and maybe you've had already, but the former judge, now prosecutor McDonald, tremendous guy, very accessible. Clearly, a meeting with the mayors, maybe you've done it already, with the county prosecutor. I would highly suggest that. I just find he's the kind of guy who would listen and possibly support the efforts through either manpower or expertise or funding. I can't tell you about funding, but I can tell you that a meeting with that group of mayors and the prosecutor in Somerset County, I think, is a really, really important idea.
Thank you, Senator. We will follow up on that. Going to the next comment. The concern is that incidents are still happening. Can we hire local security at the township or county level to support the police department?
Well, I'm going to tell you both well, normally, and this is what the mayor and committee people have to decide. Normally, local police aren't crazy about outside security. My experience over many, many years is the last thing police want are private security forces. But clearly, you should have a discussion with the police about whether that is a realistic possibility. I'm just going to tell you that historically, police don't want some other entity. They're less concerned about, let's say, sheriff's officers, state police. But when it comes to private security, you probably get some pushback, but I'm not against it. Like if there's a neighborhood and the neighborhood decides, hey, listen, we've got 100 homes in this neighborhood and we want to hire, private security, you can do that, but you're going to see that police are not crazy about that. And I'm not going to get into why, but generally they don't like it.
Thank you. This is something that we can bring up with Chief Berger and come back to the community. Thank you. The next question. What is being done to catch any of these kids and the gangs that are hiring them? Certainly seems that someone in law enforcement, federal, state, county, local, has some information that's actionable. What could we do locally to help ourselves? More officers in general, more on the overnight shifts, units stationed at the highway exit ramps and following suspicious vehicles.
Yeah, that's why probably your next Zoom should be with the chief of police and or the county prosecutor, because those questions as to, and sometimes the police don't want to answer the question of where we station officers, but I'm assuming that a Zoom such as this with the chief of police is probably really good idea. And I say it this way, when communities get together and demand action, they normally get it. So the more you're asking for it, the more you're concerned about it, the more you're talking to your law enforcement people and the county, the more likely you're going to get a response. It's just all due respect to government, that's what government responds to when people are upset and demand action. So the more people demand it, the more likely you get it. I mean, it's just the way it is. I wish it wasn't like that, but it is.
Thank you. And if I can just share with residents that one of the limitations of us using Zoom is that we have a limit of 100 spaces. And so our police chief, as well as other officers that are involved, especially in this topic, we've scheduled February the 22nd at Town Hall because we have a much larger capacity for in-person, so everyone can bring their questions. It is a security topic that is inclusive of not only this, but other threats to our community and our residents, like scams for our senior citizens. That is scheduled and the flyers are posted for that. So that is what our community has currently committed to. In addition, I'll just speak to the police chief, I think, has done an amazing job. I've attended events that he's done with residents, and I'll be attending additional ones. So he and his officers are what questions that are sent to them, they answer. So it's something that if anybody has any urgent things, I say, send in those questions, but please do note February the 22nd is a large forum that everyone is invited to and can ask whatever questions. It will also be recorded if you are unable to attend. So if I can go on to the next question, once cars are stolen, the criminals must ship them outside the United States. Can the state or federal government do something to stop this? If the stolen car cannot be sold, the incentive to steal will be removed.
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I'm assuming, and you mentioned it before, Mayor, that if they're being taken out of state or out of the country versus a chop shop somewhere, then I would assume, and I have not really looked into that issue, but I certainly will get back to you on whether or not there is an effort at the ports or anywhere else to identify vehicles that are being shipped out. And you said you spoke to Assemblywoman Munoz about that, and I'll get in touch with her as well, and Senator and Congressman Kane. I saw another question about the state situation, and I did speak to as I said, the Attorney General, Matt Platkin. The real issue is going to be, are we going to pass laws, which I've sponsored and others, actually putting people behind bars when they steal cars? And that legislation is stalled. So anyone who reaches out to any legislators, they don't have to be your senator or your assembly people because they're behind it, but to the speaker, to the attorney general, and to the Senate president, say, listen, we're frustrated. It's police officers say it's catch and release. So yeah, any emails or any letters to state leaders would be much appreciated in that regard.
Senator Bramnick, if I may just pause there for a second. So the officials that you would recommend for us as residents to request our state leadership, that would include, you said the Attorney General?
Sure. You want to know, Matt Platkin should know that this is a crisis.
Yes.
The Senate President, Nick Scuteri, should know it, as well as the Speaker, Craig Coughlin. And of course, the Governor Murphy as well. The more letters that come in, they say, hey, listen, more of our neighbors, their cars are being stolen, their house are being burglarized, the penalties are not severe enough. That kind of assistance for me, as somebody who sponsors legislation like that, would be of great assistance. Now, I don't know if they're going to change their philosophy, but at least they're going to hear that this is directly from residents as opposed to politicians.
No, thank you. And this was something just to clarify, is there any value for our residents to send to our representatives like yourself, Senator, Assemblywoman Matsakudis and Assemblywoman Munoz? Would letters of individual residents help you from an account perspective to say that your constituents are requesting this support?
Just copy us, because most of it is our legislation. If you copy us on that and we see 100 letters going to Governor Murphy saying, hey, look, we really have to toughen the penalties for these crimes, and there's a CC to me, and I see hundreds of letters going to the governor and to leadership on, the Senate and the Assembly, that it's real. I love seeing it. And whether or not it's going to change, that's a long political discussion, actually. It's, but it surely wouldn't hurt. I can tell you that.
Thank you. So one of the things I will look into is to see if I can collect on one paper all of those individuals' contact information. So if residents need a handy dandy Rolodex that they can easily locate.
Well, Brian Lee from my office is on. He can get that to you immediately after the Zoom.
Wonderful.
He'll give you a list, including the chair people of law and public safety, both in the House and in the Senate.
Wonderful. Well, we'll look forward then to sharing those with our residents after this. Thank you. Because I think at the end of the day, and all the residents that I've spoken to, they understand that the local community is going to try and optimize what we can do. But in speaking with our police officers, the laws, this catch and release, can you explain what that means? Because it's a kind of a catchy phrase, but not, I don't know that everyone understands that phrase.
Well, you steal a car, and let's think how frustrated it would be. You finally catch a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old stealing a car, and there's a chase, and you're out at night, you're a police officer. You arrest the individual, and all of us heard that. Well, they're going to be released quickly. Same thing even with somebody over 18. Uh, they're not going to stay in jail very long. So we call it catch and release because not only are the police frustrated, but here they are risking their life, chasing somebody, arrest them, and they find out within a day or two they're out again, and it actually hasn't deterred them from their business of stealing cars. So you hear that not only from the police, from prosecutors. It's really difficult. That's why I think it's hard to be a police officer today. Here you are, you finally catch somebody, and the penalties they're weak.
Can
A
you imagine
first
how we
offense.
feel? Can you imagine how we feel huddled in our house while someone in a ski mask is in our kitchen rustling through our drawers where our children are under our bed? I mean, the police are upset. Can you imagine what that feels like? It changes everything you think about life in this town. It changes everything. So that's what I mean. I really, people are beyond losing their minds over this.
And that's Jared who's speaking, correct?
That is Jared Friedberg.
So let me ask you, did they catch any of those guys?
I really don't know, but I think there's ways we can deter them though. I think about police shifts that during the day, 80% of the police are working during the daylight hours when there isn't the risk. The risk is in 4 hours at night. Should we flip police shifts in the near term, in a short term way, to just flood the zone? We have them here, but maybe they need to work nights. This is the time for police to really change and do their jobs in a way that really affects society. They really will change and affect our lives if we flip the shifts. It automatically triples the amount of police on the street. It's a simple idea. I know it's not long term, but that's one thing we can do.
And Jared, if I may share, the police chief has increased patrols over the evening, including he himself has shared that he has been patrolling at 1 a.m., as well as the deputy chief, et cetera. So there has been some immediate things. And one of the issues that we've had is that the police chief has shared some sensitive information, and it was captured and disseminated. So the ability for us to communicate all the details of what's been done is difficult, because if we share it and it gets in the wrong hands, then it jeopardizes everyone's security. So this is where, this is why, like I said, the police chief has implement immediate changes. Additionally, other topics that we've talked about, our town would prefer to communicate when things are completed versus telling you that things are in process, right? So, we'll look forward to an announcement when those license plate readers are in location. Those are in process. So there's some things that you'll be hearing more communications from as announced in the last 2 days. The police department put together a sheet, a checklist, so residents can put in place of what they can do to ensure that they have done what they can to prevent someone from wanting to break into their house or their neighborhood. The other tool that was rolled out is called Citywide. That was just announced yesterday. So there are some tools that are immediately implementing, and there's more to come. Like I said, and that's why having the senator today is also a part of this, to help ensure that we are pointed in the right direction to try to do this. So as the police chief has said, our numbers are low. However, when it happens to an individual, it doesn't matter what those numbers are, right? And we want to avoid this for any resident. And so that's why we're taking this very seriously. I just want to do just a quick time check because I believe this ends at 8:15. So we've got 5 minutes left, and I see quite a few numbers of questions. Senator, is there any?
I did want to respond. When Jared, when you talked about the emotions that your family has suffered as a result of somebody being in your house, you know, that's a really important item to bring to the attention of state officials. And I'm glad you brought that up because to talk about how your family feels after that, that's what motivates lawmakers. So I will take that as a really important piece of information that I can bring to the floor of the legislature because it makes it much more real than someone saying, well, people break into houses.
And I'm speaking on behalf of my neighbor who had this happen, and we lived, 50 yards from me, had 3 cars stolen. And for me, when you think about what it's like to live in your house after someone's come in, broken in, completely violates, not like getting burglarized when you're not home. Getting burglarized when you're home completely flips the board on your psychology of dealing with it. And I think, we as a town, I know it's going on across the state. I know this, but we have trained police, we have resources, and I appreciate what the mayor's doing. I really do. But we have to completely flip the table on what's going on here. Complete. We have massive amounts of police who work during the day shift, solving and dealing with risk that isn't there. 98% of the risk to us right now is about home invasion, maybe 100%. So you have to apply the manpower and the resources to the risk. And if it does mean going to the mattresses and really changing the dynamic of how police are serving for now, I think we have to do that. They work, we have the manpower. They're just working during the day. And again, this is not a magic bullet. I understand there's a lot of things we have to do, but I don't think anybody cares about a cop sitting on Allen Road at 2 p.m. doing his job. He's assigned to do that, stopping cars going 48 miles an hour. Nobody cares when we have home invasions going on 7 hours later, when all those police are asleep in their beds at their homes. That's what I mean is a simple, logical idea. And I know nothing's a magic bullet. So this is what we need to do. We have to get much more energetic and active about this. We are all at risk every night. And again, my neighbor won't even talk about it. He's afraid, but I will talk for him.
So Jared, you did a very nice job in writing your comment. Perhaps you could capture that and put that in the email to the senator, and then he can leverage that. So don't lose that. And the other is, like I said, I just want to reiterate that the police chief has implemented additional patrols at night. And for what it's worth, I can't say this is in all the cases, but the police have said that some individuals are casing people during the day. So if the officers are on the street, and again, this is something that they're trying to deter crime. If someone's trying to case to figure out to come at nighttime, it's something where I'll just be honest, I think we need to defer the police tactics to our police leadership because they communicate amongst each other and can do that best work. But I just want you to know you are heard. And again, the Township Committee is going to look at the resourcing for the police department, especially in this upcoming budget cycle. So you have been heard, and I really appreciate your comments.
Thanks, Mayor. Really appreciate it. We need your leadership. We're happy you're here. This is your moment. I mean it. This is your moment to have a huge impact on our town and on our little society here. So
thank you. As we begin to close, Senator Bramnick, because I'm sure we could go on this for a while, this is a nice comment. What are we doing at the state level? And can you please help summarize?
Sure. So after my discussions with the Attorney General and with both sides of the aisle, there is a sense that crime has become one of the most significant issues in the state of New Jersey. So I'm hoping during this next session that both sides of the aisle will come together and create a package of reforms that sends a message to the bad guys that there is going to be a penalty for stealing a car and breaking into a home. and that there will be minimum mandatory sentences, and therefore the message would get out. Actually, the bad guys know more than the lawyers. The bad guys surely know as much or more than the police. So the message has to come from Trenton that crime doesn't pay, and that's the kind of legislation we've drafted. And I think that the argument is starting to fall upon the ears of the legislature. So I'll report back to you as to progress on the legislation.
And I will ensure that to keep the line of communication from the township to our residents. I hope you can appreciate that this is something that the more I've learned about this, the madder I've gotten. I had learned that the police chief had shared that they cracked a case of a porch pirate, and that individual was immediately released and given a court date in 6 months. So the point is that we should not have to live in a lawless society. We are a hardworking group of residents in this community living together in peace, and we want to live in peace and not in fear. So you have my commitment that I'm going to go to the mat on this and speak to whomever. And I thank you. And I will ask for these notes to be sent to these leaders, our state leaders, and I have just tremendous gratitude to Senator Bramnick for your time today, also the support from our Assemblywomen. And I want to note on this call, Deputy Mayor Janice Fields and Anna Duarte McCarthy, our town councilwoman, is also online. And I want to make note that Andrew McCarthy, Committeeman Andrew McCarthy, is also one of our police liaisons. So I want you to know that we have a very large group of people that are concerned about this. So you are heard. Thank you for joining tonight. This is recorded and it will be shared for those that are not able to join.
Thank you, Mayor, and we'll continue this discussion. Please reach out to the Somerset County Prosecutor as well.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
People during the day. So if the officers are on the street, and again, this is something that they're trying to deter crime. If someone's trying to case to figure out to come at nighttime, it's something where I'll just be honest, I think we need to defer the police tactics to our police leadership because they communicate amongst each other and can do that best work. But I just want you to know you are heard. And again, the Township Committee is going to look at the resourcing for the police department, especially in this upcoming budget cycle. So you have been heard, and I really appreciate your comments.
Thanks, Mayor. Really appreciate it. We need your leadership. We're happy you're here. This is your moment. I mean it. This is your moment to have a huge impact on our town and on our little society here. So.
Thank you. As we begin to close, Senator Bramnick, because I'm sure we could go on this for a while, this is a nice comment. What are we doing at the state level? And can you please help summarize?
Sure. So after my discussions with the Attorney General and with both sides of the aisle, there is a sense that crime has become one of the most significant issues in the state of New Jersey. So I'm hoping during this next session that both sides of the aisle will come together and create a package of reforms that sends a message to the bad guys that there is going to be a penalty for stealing a car and breaking into a home, and that there will be minimum mandatory sentences, and therefore the message would get out. Actually, the bad guys know more than the lawyers. The bad guys surely know as much or more than the police. So the message has to come from Trenton that crime doesn't pay, and that's the kind of legislation we've drafted. And I think that the argument is starting to fall upon the ears of the legislature. So I'll report back to you as to progress on the legislation.
And I will ensure that to keep the line of communication from the township to our residents. I hope you can appreciate that this is something that the more I've learned about this, the madder I've gotten. I had learned that the police chief had shared that they cracked a case of a porch pirate, and that individual was immediately released and given a court date in 6 months. So the point is that we should not have to live in a lawless society. We are a hardworking group of residents in this community living together in peace, and we want to live in peace and not in fear. So you have my commitment that I'm going to go to the mat on this and speak to whomever. And I thank you. And I will ask for these notes to be sent to these leaders, our state leaders, and I have just tremendous gratitude to Senator Bramnick for your time today, also the support from our Assemblywomen. And I want to note on this call, Deputy Mayor Janice Fields and Anna Duarte McCarthy, our town councilwoman, is also online. And I want to make note that Andrew McCarthy, Committeeman Andrew McCarthy, is also one of our police liaisons. So I want you to know that we have a very large group of people that are concerned about this. So you are heard. Thank you for joining tonight. This is recorded and it will be shared for those that are not able to join.
Thank you, Mayor, and we'll continue this discussion. Please reach out to the Somerset County Prosecutor as well.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.